Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hi to Kathy from Cold, Indiana, Pennsylvania. Glad your power is back on for class as well. Welcome, Milagritos from arrived on time. Glad you arrived on time. Hi, Kesha. Hi, everybody who's here today. Thank you so much for joining me for this Christmas tree cupcake class. These cupcakes are so cute. And bonus, they're super delicious. They're super fudgy, very chocolatey. We're going to be making cupcakes from scratch. Kana just shared the handout in the chat. So open up the chat and grab that when you can. The recipe is there for the cupcakes, for the buttercream, and some little instructions and things like that to help you out. So if anyone is baking along today, let me know. Let me know in the chat how you're doing along the way. But we are going to be baking the cupcakes first, getting that out of the way. I have some. Hi, how are you? I have some that are cooled and ready to go, so we'll get right into the buttercream. We're going to be doing an American style buttercream, which is the most basic buttercream. You can also make these cupcakes with store-bought buttercream if you prefer. That'd be fine as well. And we're going to be doing some little tricks and tips with some ice cream cones as the base of our Christmas trees, so that should be fun as well. So these are really cute for kids, for adults. You can kind of glam them up as much as you want to. We're going to use some gold dragées and things like that. But Kana, when you get a chance, come on down. I'm going to show you guys what I'm working with. Thank you so much. So for the cupcakes themselves, basic ingredients here. These are pantry staples. This recipe makes 10 cupcakes, and you'll notice, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but the container of sugar cones from the supermarket also comes with 10. Oh, this one came with 12. Oh, I thought it was 10. All right, well, you have a couple extra in case they break. But essentially, we're making one batch, and you should be able to do with these cones, with the cupcakes, everything should work out perfectly. But for the cupcakes themselves, I split the recipe because I baked 5 already this morning. But you'll notice I've got oil, vegetable oil, a little bit of water, or you can use coffee for chocolate cake as well, which can be a really nice way to enhance the chocolate flavor. Buttermilk. This is my buttermilk substitute. We'll talk about that in a minute. Egg, flour, all-purpose flour, granulated sugar, baking soda, salt, and cocoa powder. And I did want to mention that I love to use Special Dark. This is like my go-to store-bought brand if I'm buying cocoa powder in the supermarket. The Special Dark, it's Dutch process, so you get like a much deeper, richer chocolate flavor and that really super dark chocolatey color as well, which I think makes the most delicious chocolate cupcake. So go for this one if you can get it. But if not, any cocoa powder will work as long as it's unsweetened. And then for the buttercream, we've got powdered sugar, confectioner's sugar, unsalted butter at room temperature. You want to make sure it's nice and soft and ready to go. A little bit of milk or cream just to kind of loosen it up. Salt, vanilla, or you can really flavor this in any way you love. So it could be with citrus zest, extracts, anything you prefer. This is my vanilla bean paste that I think I talk about every class. I just love it so much. And we're going to be coloring the buttercream with our gel colors. I've got green and I've got a little bit of brown, just to kind of deepen that color a little bit. Gel color is great because it's going to give you the most vibrant color without thinning out our buttercream. But if you are working with liquid food coloring, that'll work too. You're just going to kind of downgrade how much milk you're adding to the buttercream in that case. And then for decorating, so I've got my sugar cones. That's going to help us create our Christmas trees. I've got this great sugar blend, sprinkle blend from Michael's, which is like the Christmas blend, but any sprinkles that you love will work nicely. I've got some mini M&Ms for ornaments. This is all optional. It totally depends on what you love. Some silver dragées, some gold dragées, some little sprinkle stars to kind of top them off, just as like a fun addition. You could also use little gingerbread cookie stars. That would be super cute as well. And that's pretty much it. I also got these really great liners from Michael's that I thought were really cute from this. They're just like these brown Kraft colored liners. But I thought those looked really nice with the Christmas tree decoration. So I have those as well. But of course, you could definitely use Christmas tree liners. Christmas themed liners would work really nicely as well. So to get started, I'm going to get the decorations out of the way. We'll get the buttercream ingredients out of the way. And this cupcake recipe is the chocolate cake batter recipe that I use anytime I'm making chocolate cake, whether it's a layer cake or cupcakes. And I just think it's so delicious and so fudgy and so rich. And it's all done in one bowl, which makes it even better. So it's just a really quick and easy recipe that you should definitely just keep on hand for whenever you need it. I'm going to get started. So I'm going to put this over here. If you are baking along, you're going to want to preheat your oven to 375 degrees. And Karen said, my cupcakes always stick to the liner. What's a good tip to keep them from sticking? You know, what's funny about these liners is these are such thick liners. They're really high quality, and they have this sort of silicone. You see how they're sort of shiny on the inside? So you're not going to have that issue with liners like this. They will kind of just come right off. But the issue with if you were going to spray your liners or something like that to kind of separate them out is sometimes if you bake your cupcakes and you spray the liners first, they'll separate before you're eating them. Like if you ever notice you bake a batch of cupcakes, and then the liners start to separate from the cupcake, that could be really frustrating. So I don't necessarily recommend giving them a spray or anything like that. I think better to have it stick just a touch. And if your cupcakes are perfectly baked, they should sort of release on their own. So we'll talk about like how to know when your cupcakes are ready, and that should help as well. All right, so let's start with our wet ingredients. So you notice I've got a really small bowl because again, I'm having this recipe right now since I already baked half the batch earlier. And hi from New Jersey, I'm in New Jersey as well. We're having very nice weather today. Although Kano was sick this week, I was sick again this week as well. You could still hear it in my voice. I had some sort of flu. It's just never ending over here. We're always sick with something. So I've got my egg going in. I've got vegetable oil. Now, any neutral oil that you love will work for this, whether you love canola, vegetable oil, or anything like that. You want to use sort of a flavorless oil. And I sort of mentioned before, so the recipe itself calls for buttermilk. If you don't have buttermilk, my favorite substitute, I know sometimes you'll see online, they'll say like, take milk and add lemon juice. But you'll notice that you don't get that thick consistency that a really good buttermilk will have, like a whole buttermilk. So my favorite, and you can kind of see it in here, I do half sour cream and half whole milk for whatever the amount of buttermilk calls for. And you get that really creamy consistency. You get that little tang that the buttermilk will give you. And that's just my easiest go-to buttermilk substitute that I use anytime a recipe calls for buttermilk. Because usually to buy a whole quart or pint of buttermilk and keep it on hand, I just never go through it fast enough. So for me, that's just the best way to do it. You could also use Greek yogurt in the place of sour cream if you prefer. You could do that as well. Let's all keep on wearing warm clothing. Yes, exactly. Exactly. All right, so my sugar going in. I've got granulated sugar. And I'm just going to give this a whisk to make sure it's nice and smooth. We added that sour cream, so I just want to make sure there's no little lumps running around in there. And again, this is all just in one bowl. There's no creaming of butter. There's nothing happening here. It's just easy breezy, which I love, especially for a cake. If I'm worrying about frosting a cake and making the buttercream, I don't want to have to worry about grabbing my stand mixer just to make the cake batter. Cocoa powder, salt, baking soda. And we are adding the water or coffee if you prefer last. Can you use almond milk? You absolutely can. Yes, you can. So once I get this mostly incorporated, it's going to be pretty thick right away. Before I get too far in, I'm going to start pouring in my water. About half. Work it in, and then I'll add the rest of it. And it's going to be thick to start, but then it's going to thin out really nicely. This will help you get your batter nice and smooth. Look at that. Looks delicious already. Rest in my water. And that's it. That's your cake. So a 10 cupcake size batch probably is going to make about, you know, a layer or so, like a 9-inch layer. Maybe a bit more. So if you want to turn this into a layer cake, you could definitely use this recipe for that as well. All right, so let's get all this out of the way. We're going to portion it into our liners. And because this batter's thin, you really could just pour it right in, or you can grab a portion scoop, and you're going to fill them about 3/4 of the way. Is it possible to have the substitution of the buttermilk written in the chat? I will leave for a minute and lost it. Oh yeah, definitely. So whenever they're calling for buttermilk, let's say it's a cup of buttermilk, I'll just do half a cup of sour cream and half a cup of whole milk. So just half and half sour cream, half whole milk. That's my go-to. And that works great for pancakes. If I'm making buttermilk pancakes, I'm not using buttermilk. I'm using sour cream and whole milk. And you would never know the difference. It's like perfectly moist, tender, delicious. You get that slight tang from the sour cream. Really good. All right. So it perfectly makes 5 cupcakes. So a full batch, just like the recipe says, is going to give you 10. So these are going to go in 375. Let me see here. How full do fill liners? 3/4 of the way. Just make sure they're all nice and even. Give them a look-see. If one looks more full than the other, take a bit out, add it to the others. But it should be 3/4 of the way full. And I believe, Kena, tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's 14 to 16 minutes for these. And when you're baking chocolate cupcakes, the most important thing is not to overbake them, which is true for any cupcake recipe. And I know one of you was saying, well, my cupcakes always stick to the liners. It might be that either you might be over baking, so they're sort of drying out on the edges and getting stuck on the liners. Sometimes that'll do it. But really, when we talk about spring back, sometimes I'll take my finger and I'll just go over and just give it a press. To me, this is more reliable than using a toothpick. A toothpick, I'm not really getting the sense of how my cupcakes are set. Are they really liquidy in the middle? Am I going to take them off and get batter on my finger? Are they set, but they just have a very moist spot just on the top? As soon as your cupcake kind of just springs back to the touch, you know that they're ready. And for chocolate cake, I even go a step further to kind of underbake them just slightly. So they're going to really hold on to that fudgy texture as they set and as they cool. And once we decorate these, I'm going to cut into one so you can see the inside. They're so moist, so fudgy, so delicious. And you get this like perfect little dome on the top. Just so nice. So that's like my go-to chocolate cupcake recipe. And same goes for vanilla cupcakes, just until they're set. You can use a toothpick if you want to, but always make sure there's just a couple of moist crumbs. You never want it to be totally dry when you're checking your cupcakes to know that they're ready. All right, so we're going to set this aside and we're going to start our buttercream. So I've got my stand mixer. You could do this with a hand mixer as well if you want to. Try to make it so you can see it here. And again, my butter is at room temperature. And I'm going to do the full amount of buttercream that the recipe called for here, because by the time I bake off those last cupcakes, I'll have plenty of cupcakes to decorate. So I'm just going to go ahead and get my butter in. Nice and soft. You could leave out your butter. In the winter, I tend to leave mine out overnight, because in here it gets cool. So it's nice just to make sure that it's nice and soft. I'm just going to give that a mix, just to kind of beat it up a little bit. Thanks, Kathy. All right. I'm just whipping it up just a little, just to break it up, make sure that there's no big lumps of cold butter or anything like that. And slowly, we're going to start getting in our other ingredients. So I've got my powdered sugar, I've got vanilla, and I've got salt, which is so important. If you're using salted butter, you can kind of cut that down a bit, but salt is really going to balance the sweetness, especially an American style buttercream, if you're not doing an Italian meringue buttercream or anything like that. American style is so sweet, and we're just talking about butter and sugar. That's the base of it. So salt is so essential. Vanilla is so essential to give it a little bit of depth. All of that is going to kind of take that flavor to the next level. And even if I'm using store-bought frosting, which is rare, but if I do, let's say, opt for store-bought frosting, I do always add any sort of flavorings I can, especially like some good vanilla, and just give it a little bit of a whip, just to make it a little bit more homemade tasting. And that usually makes a big difference. All right, so I'm going to get about half my powdered sugar in, because I don't want a big cloud of sugar all over the kitchen. So just about half, just to work it in, and then we'll get in the rest. Nice low speed, so it's not going to go every place. And I've got my milk here, and really depending on the softness of your butter, if you've ever made buttercream and you're like, why is my buttercream so loose or so soupy or so soft, it's not piping nicely? It could be, let's say if you're making it in the middle of summer It'll look like it's snowing in your kitchen. Exactly. Although that would be festive, but we don't want that today. But if you are making buttercream or frosting on a warmer day, your room temperature butter is going to be a lot warmer than my room temperature butter in the middle of winter, right? So ideally, room temperature butter, if you took the temperature with a thermometer, it should be somewhere around 65 to 70 degrees, maybe even a little bit less if I'm making something like cookies and I don't want my butter super soft. It could even be more like 60 degrees. But in the summer, you may find that that butter is 75 degrees or 80 degrees. And when you touch it, it's going to look wet to the touch and shiny. It's going to be really soft. And so what's going to happen is all the moisture that's in your butter is going to moisten your sugar. So if I add the same amount of milk to my recipe that I do when my butter is colder, it's going to come out a lot looser. So this milk, this quantity, all depends on the temperature of our butter and the way this comes together in the bowl. So you always want to err on the side of adding less. Just start with a bit. You can always add more as you need it. But you'll see as we mix, we're just mixing it a little bit at a time, just to kind of bring it together. So I'm going to add a splash and just let it go. I'm not going to rush the process. Just going to see how it ends up. And if it's really not coming together, I'm going to add another splash. You can see it's kind of working itself in. So see, I really did not add much, and it's already pretty cohesive, right? So depending on what you're making, if I take a look at this consistency, and we haven't whipped this up yet really, but if I take a look at this consistency, it's very thick, right? So if I'm piping like really intricate designs, let's say like a Christmas tree, and I want things to hold up really nicely, a really thick buttercream might be really great for this purpose. If I'm filling French macaroons or something like that, and I want a little bit more of a pipeable consistency, I might add a little bit more milk or cream just to kind of loosen it up a touch. Can you overmix buttercream? Yes, you can overmix buttercream. It will become grainy if you over whip it, but it's hard to do. We can sort of whip it up a bit. And you'll see, I'm going to do that. I added just one tiny splash of milk just to loosen it slightly, and we're going to whip it up just for about a minute or so. And I'll show you the consistency that we're looking for. You can see as it whips, it's really sort of gaining volume, which is nice. And it's becoming a lot fluffier and smoother, which is nice. Do you use salted or unsalted butter? You can use either one. Either one is great. If you are using salted butter in the place of unsalted, you might want to cut down on that additional salt depending on your taste preference. You can always taste the buttercream at the end and add a little extra salt if you want to. But you might not need that additional salt that the recipe calls for. All right, let's take a look. So this is what we like. So I've got this really fluffy, light consistency, but it's really holding its shape nicely, right? I've got these nice peaks. Now I'm going to be piping a Christmas tree, so I want all those peaks to hold. So this is great. Now, if I kept whipping this, let's say I whipped it for another couple of minutes, it would only gain more volume. It would become more fluffy and light. That's a good thing, right? But let's say I whipped it for 10 minutes. That's the point where if I just left this mixer going and I walked away, you may end up over whipping your buttercream and it might become a little bit grainy over time, but it's hard to do, right? And yes, so Kana shared that PDF earlier for the recipe, but maybe Kana, if you get a chance, if you could share it one more time in the chat, that would be great. All right, so let's talk about how we're constructing these things. And we are going to turn this buttercream green in a minute, but we are going to keep some of it white as well. So I've got cupcakes. Now we talked about ice cream cones. So the thing about these ice cream cones is if I take them right out, oh, thank you so much. If I take these right out of the box, they're pretty tall. Right? Oh my God, they're like humongous. And you can imagine that might be a lot. It depends on the look you're going for. But what I like to do, a quick tip, is I take a cup with a little bit of hot water in it, just like this, and I take my cone and I just dip it in just for about maybe 5 to 10 seconds or so. And that'll help soften the cone slightly so I can go in with a scissor and just trim it a bit, because you could see the difference. A little less overwhelming, right? They could just be a little tall. That's totally optional. But I do like to trim them down just a touch, because I feel like by the time we pipe on all that buttercream, it could just be a little large, especially if these are for kids. So you could see once it softens, take it out of the water, and it's not a perfect fix. They will crumble still a little bit, but you can go in with your scissor and just kind of trim around and just get some of that excess off. Ah, and then drop it. No, but that'll just make it a little bit easier to deal with, which is nice. The tree Rockefeller Center, exactly. Which, you know, for cupcakes, maybe that's too much. I don't know. But so here I've got 5, so I'm going to put those over here so they're ready to go. Put them on our tray. And now, in the picture I posted for class, I did not do this, but afterwards I thought it was a good idea just to do like a snowy base. So we're going to steal some of this white buttercream. And I've got some piping bags here. Now, whether you work with fabric piping bags or plastic, that's totally up to you. Fabrics are definitely better for the environment, so I applaud you if you are using your fabric bags. But I'm going to steal just a touch. And if we have leftover, we could always add this back to the pile, but you don't even need a tip for this. We're just doing a nice snowy base. And you'll notice when I filled my bag, and we talk about this every time, but I did fold down that top so it stays nice and clean. And now I could just go in and give it a squeeze, and it's ready to use. Let's make some snowy bases. A great barrier for the cone tree. Yeah, exactly. And Kana, if you want, it's up to you. I'm not sure which angle is better right now, but I do have that other camera. Hello, there we go. Later. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's give this a trim. And you want this to be pretty, you know, pretty generous, because it's about a ½ inch or so. You want it to look like nice, billowy, snowy things. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but just like a snowy base. I don't know, have fun with it, whatever you feel. And before you put these on, we are going to cover them in green buttercream, or you could do it after, which I might do today. But if you want to fill these, keep in mind, you can also fill these up with marshmallows, with candies, with anything you want, so that when somebody kind of takes the cone off, it could be like a fun Christmas surprise. And that would be fun too. So once we start doing that, I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to color the rest green. So I've got my gel color. I've got green, and I mentioned earlier I have a little bit of brown, because it does just take that color sort of to the next level, and you'll see why. So I'm going to add a couple of drops of green, and I want 2 shades. I want a light green and I want a dark green. So I'm just going to whip this in. A second for that. And in the meantime, we're going to get our tip into our bag so it's ready to go. All right, that's beating it. I'm adding a touch more green. Come with me. You can see it's very light. And if you do prefer more of a natural food coloring, a green spirulina powder, I used this recently for something else, can make a very nice green. You can also use something like matcha if you're doing these for adults. That could be fun. Especially with all that drama last week with the red food coloring. Did everybody hear about that? I was like, bananas. They're like, finally, we got to get rid of the red food coloring. And I was like, oh, the timing, because we had just done like a bright red French macaroon class. I felt so bad. I was like, oh my God. If you didn't hear, they took red food coloring, well, one type of red food coloring off the market. Okay, oh, I don't know where you are. Here you are. So for this light green, I'm just using a very, very tiny, this is like a little star, but we have a couple of different tips that we're using today. So I have a very tiny star. I have a slightly bigger star. These are a couple of options you can use, or you could use a leaf tip for this. So I'm going to show you a few different ways. So depending on what tip you have, if you don't have any tips, you could take your piping bag, and you see that this is just in a V shape. You can actually just cut a piping bag into a V shape, and you'll have your own sort of DIY piping tip. But hopefully you have some piping tips to use, because they will give you a bit of a sturdier base to work with, which can be helpful for a project like this. So I'm stealing some of my light green, and then we're going to color the rest dark green. And so when I do that, I'm going to add more green, and I'm also going to add a little bit of that brown, just to kind of deepen that color and give it like a little earthy touch, a little bit more tree-like. So I add some green, I'm going to add a little brown. Don't overdo it, because it will turn it brown, but just a touch. It makes it almost more like a sage green rather than a green, which I kind of like. Okay. And go a little bit more, just a touch, and then we'll stop. This is totally based on your preference. Put the green away. Add a drip of brown. Thank you. And we'll get our other two bags ready here. Thanks, Jennifer. All right, this looks good. So check out what we got. And I've got some on the sides that I'm going to scrape down, but you see it's just a little bit deeper of a color. It's like mossy. It's a mossy green, which I kind of like. It's not too dark. You could go darker. But to get in my tips, remember, we're using small tips today. So I'm going pretty small when I cut my bag, only cutting a little bit of the way. And scoot it up. You just want to clear the tip. You don't want it too much lower than that, because we don't want it to pop out accidentally. So that's perfect. I've got my leaf tip, I've got my star tip, and we're ready to fill. So again, the type of tip is totally optional. You really only need one tip for this. You don't need multiple tips, but I wanted to show you some options. So one bag, one tip is perfectly fine. Okay. It's a nice thick buttercream. All right, so right in our bag. It's ready. And this guy. Come on in. All right. All right, so let's do it. Let's get our mixer out of the way. We've got our buttercreams. We've got our white. Get you a bit closer. Back to the front here. Righty, perfect. All right, let's make some cupcakes. So the first thing we want to do is we want to cover our base, because believe it or not, once you pipe, even if you're piping perfectly, odds are you're going to end up with some pieces of cone kind of showing through. So if you have gloves, they're helpful. I just didn't want to get green hands, but you don't have to. It reminds me of the gala Christmas collection at Michael's. Yeah. I get in so much trouble at Michael's because I just want to buy everything every time I'm there. It's like a very dangerous place for me. All right, so because I just took all the buttercream out, I'm going to steal some from my bowl. And all we're going to do is use our offset spatula, but I'm just kind of like covering this quickly. And we're going to use our offset just to cover it all up with buttercream. thin layer is good, but just to make sure that you've got kind of a green base so that nothing is going to show through after we pipe. Need a little bit more, you can always add more. And if you are doing this with kids, let's say, this is a good part to kind of do ahead. And then they can come in with the piping bag. And it's a nice task for them to just kind of like decorate instead of having to worry about like the actual construction of the tree. And so I've just covered it, right? Nice and covered. So once that's done, we can use our little snowy base and just kind of stick it right in. And we're ready. Oh, did you see my dog running around? Sorry. Yeah, she's funny, you know. When I teach classes, she used to be very chill, but now I feel like she wants to be a part of the action a little bit, which isn't the worst thing. All right, so we're just going to do a few more just so we are ready to cover. Sorry, I keep raising it higher where you can't see it, but here we go. I'm just using my offset just to kind of lightly cover. You could do it when it's already on the cupcake, but you can imagine how tricky that would get. So it is easier to just kind of do it first. Perfect. Yeah, messy. Look at this. Look at this. This is some Christmas fun. Nice snowy base. Squeeze it in. What kind of spatula are you using? This is my mini offset. It's a little offset. You should definitely have one of these. If you don't have one of those, they're good for so many things. I have like a big offset spatula that I use for decorating larger cakes and a mini offset spatula for little tasks like this. And it just makes everything really easy. We should have a class where we make doggy treats. We should. I'm sure she would appreciate that. My dog's birthday is right after Christmas, and she's turning, how old are you turning? She's turning 7. I think so. We got her when she was 2 months old. She was a rescue. And she was so cute. And she sat right in my lap. And I cried. And I was like, oh my God, she's so sweet. I need to have her. And then we brought her home. And boy, she tricked us. She was immediately off to like a running start. Just like anything she could get her hands on. But we love her. All right. So I'll do one more and then I'll stop. I'll move on. Just want to make sure we have enough to work with here. And even though we dip these cones in water, it's amazing how quickly they sort of dry out. We only dip the base and we cut off most of it, but it does make it a lot easier to handle, and it makes them a lot smaller, which is very nice. All right, so one more. Big snowy scene. Squeeze it in. Ready to go. All right, we'll save this one for later. All righty, so let's deglove. So we got a few different designs we could do today, but depending on what tip you're using, if we start with our star tips, the one I was just using to kind of coat the cupcakes, and I do need to wipe it off a bit because I made it all green on the outside. The easiest method is to start with just little stars. So we take one of our cupcakes And you want to start at the base. It's always easiest to start at the bottom. And just without even swirling or anything, all I'm going to do is just pipe a little star. Just sticking out. Just like that, all over the base. And as I work my way around, I'm going to work my way up the sides. Then the next one we're going to do is taking that same idea, but sort of adding little rosettes. So you'll see the difference there. It is kind of fun to also make like a forest of trees. You could do some different designs. Making trees gets very like Bob Ross-esque. Just like, you can see it just really filled up nicely. You get this like really cute finish. My baby's 13. She was a rescue puppy, put on the road by a stupid breeder because she needed to be all black but had a small spot of white. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. Well, you are so lucky to have her. Do you expect people to eat the Christmas tree ice cream cone? I would eat it. I'll tell you, when I made these about probably a month ago to post the class, and my daughter like went right for it, and she loved the cone part. So the cone definitely is super edible, ready to go, tasty, no downside to it. Adults probably won't eat it, to be honest with you. They'll probably take the cone part off, but it's pretty and it's fun and it's totally edible. And again, you can fill it with anything you want. You could fill it with any sort of like holiday sprinkle, not the whole thing, but part of it with holiday sprinkles. You could fill it with marshmallows, anything you want. So it's almost like confetti cake where you sort of like open it up the center, piñata cake, sorry, where you open it up and it's like surprise. And that could be really fun. So just for this one, so while our buttercream is soft is when you want to add all of your decorations, and it will kind of firm up as it sits. So this is the time where I'm going to grab anything I want to finish this with. Like, for example, a star for the top. That's a classic. The fun of making these, if you're decorating with dragées, is that you can kind of just like throw them at the Christmas tree, which I feel like kids will definitely enjoy because they just kind of stick. You can also use, and you've definitely all seen influencers with their like tiny tweezers decorating things. You can use tweezers if you want to put these on. I just feel like that's a little, you know, it's a little fancy for Christmas tree cupcakes, but you can do it. Mini M&Ms make really nice ornaments, I think. So some little ornaments on there can be really cute. And of course, we're all big fans of luster. So a little bit of luster dusted finish. You could also color some of your buttercream and do any sort of like little garlands or things like that. Can be really pretty. Have as much fun with as you want. And if you are setting this up for like your holiday party, you can put out all your decorations and your piping bags and people can decorate as they like, which can make it such a fun thing. I don't know if you can hear that, but my dog got a sprinkle, so she's very lucky. I've got my spray, my glitter spray, just to kind of zhuzh it a little. Another optional, but it's so fun, right? So that's one. So that's like one option. You can star tip it. Let's do one with little rosettes, and then we'll do one with our leaf tip. And you can see the difference. So if I'm doing multiple rosettes, I can take a couple of colors. I've got my light green and my dark. And we can kind of have some fun with it. So instead of just holding it in one spot, they would be so fun for a Christmas party. And for a wedding, what I would definitely do, because of like the white and all, is just like a little snowy finish. Just gives it like such a nice, it's like a little bit more glam, you know, with the snow. So that could be really pretty. All right, so rosette style. We could do a couple of different ways. So you can pipe up. We could do some like this. We sort of just go this direction. So I'm kind of working my way up the tree. This is kind of like piping a shell almost. And it doesn't need to look perfect because we're making layers here. Working my way up. All the way up the tree. Pretty, I like this one. That might be my favorite. That'd be kind of fun. Or take that same green and do some rosettes all over. I'm just kind of adding them. I'm kind of adding them just like randomly because I'm going to be adding some of that lighter green. See, I'm just sort of like working my way up. Lighter green. Oh yes, I use confectioner's sugar for snow. Yes. I'm just kind of filling in. Can also add, we'll go back with the dark green and do some stars. Just to kind of fill it. Hold on. Adjusting. It's funny how the warmth of your hands really softens the buttercream over time. So in the beginning, if you're like, oh, I'm having a hard time piping, maybe my buttercream's too thick, just let your hands kind of warm it up a bit, because that's what's going to keep your buttercream really stable. It's having it thick enough that even as your hands warm it up, it's not going anywhere. You could also, you see how I'm two-toning it, but you could put two different colored frostings in the same bag and pipe rosettes and really get the two-tone that way too. That would be pretty. I've got like none left in here, but let's squeeze it. I'm just going to add some little rosettes every now and then just to fill in anywhere I missed. This one is a little weirder, I'm not going to lie, but I still like it. I think it's cute. It's kind of fun. It's different. It's weird, but it's fun. All right, and let's do one with our leaf tip. So the leaf tip is more of like your classic Christmas tree. So if you haven't worked with a leaf tip before, you've got that little V. Ooh, you can't see that. That little V on the top. And you're going to use that to pipe. Okay. So this makes a little leaf. So I'm going to work my way all around the base. And you don't want it coming out too far because it's a tree, you know? But just working our way around. And now you can kind of move up the tree. And you could kind of angle a bit down because a tree, you know, typically the branches are kind of coming down the sides. Yeah, this is fun too. This one takes a little longer because like there's so many leaves to cover. But it does look very tree-like when we're done. Hold on. Adjusting. You notice when I'm piping, I'm not piping from the top of the bag. I'm sort of grabbing halfway down and twisting. And then it's like I get more pressure, which is nice. You're not worried about pushing the whole batch of frosting down the length of the bag. Give yourself a little more control over it. It's kind of covering nicely. Oh, there we go. Hello. What do you guys think? Which one is your favorite? Curious. I'm kind of partial, I think, to the second one. Tell me what you think. We're almost at the top. You can make miniature cupcakes and decorate them like presents and put them in displays. That would be so cute. I would love to make little present cupcakes. That'd be cute. And you can make, if you've ever seen, they actually sell mini cupcake cones. They're like really small. You can buy them online. It's like more of a specialty product. But you can buy those and they are so cute. And you could do these mini as well, which would be like adorable. But I love that idea of the presents. I think that'd be so cute. Just gluing this star. There we go. So I'm sticking some stars on. It's tempting me to eat the realistic one. Yeah, I like that one too. I think this one's my favorite. I know we didn't add any ornaments, but I'm like a little partial to this. I think it's so cute. Well, let's finish them off really quick. We'll plate them up just to see the finished product here. Again, you could throw your dragées, or at this point, if your buttercream has started to set, you might have to place them on, which arguably is a lot less fun than throwing them. But it does lessen the amount that your dog is going to eat. So in a way, I guess that's good. All right. Silver bells. Silver bells. It's Christmas. All right. Okay. All right, I'll stop fussing with them, but we are going to give them a final dusting of snow, just like we did on the first one. That was so cute. I know, right? It's like hard to walk away once you start. All right. Let's move these out of the way. Let's pretend we're serving these at a fancy event. I'd have to make 10 just for me. That's good. You could also, not to like get crazy or anything, but you could fill the ice cream cones with ice cream. Just saying, just hear me out. And then put them on top of the cupcake and then serve them. And how fun would that be? If it was like, surprise, there's ice cream inside. I think that'd be super fun. So a little dusting, a little snow, totally optional, but makes them even cuter, I think. And then you're ready to serve. So you can do these ahead. The buttercream kind of protects the cone. So you can make these a day or two in advance and keep them in the fridge and then serve them. You can prep the cupcakes ahead. You could freeze the cupcakes themselves without all of the frosting and decorations about a month in advance and have your cupcakes ready. You can make the buttercream a day ahead and refrigerate it and bring it to room temperature. And then everybody can decorate their own without having to make anything the day you're serving. I can say all of that again if that was too fast. But this is the end result. I hope you enjoyed this class. I had so much fun. Oh, and I promised to show you the inside of the cupcake. So just check out, oh, which one are we going to destroy? The weird one. Come here, little weirdo. There we go. Taken out. Oh, come with me. Try not to drop. I just want to show you the texture of the cake. Check out like how rich and fudgy and chocolatey. This is, to me, this is like the best chocolate cupcake recipe. So keep this, keep this recipe just for that. And you can use that year round. Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you so much, Milagritos. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm so glad. I hope to see you guys soon for more classes. Have a very happy holiday season. To everyone celebrating Hanukkah, Christmas, all the holidays, I hope you have a wonderful holiday. I hope you have a wonderful New Year. I'll see you after the New Year for more classes. We have a bagel class in January. Come for that. Make your own bagel. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Kana, for your help. Yes, Valentine's Day classes are posted online, and I'm posting more in the next couple of days for later in February as well. Thank you. Merry Christmas. Thank you so much.